This is going to be the first episode in a series. I'm going to make 8 parts and I'm going to fix every single team in the NFL. And some teams are going to take way less fixing than others. So I'm going to go division by division and we're going to start off with my home division, the NFC North, being that I'm from Chicago. Now, that doesn't make me a Bears fan, but we are going to start with the Bears very first. And it's not just because they made a splash in the last 48 hours, totally revamping their offensive line. I'm going to go worst record to first record in every division because theoretically, the teams at the top should need less fixing. Although in this particular division, I don't think that's necessarily true. We're jumping in a little bit late, but I wanted to make sure that this was after the combine and before free agency. So this is kind of the only week I can do these videos. And if that means that I'm a little bit off and I haven't gotten all of the signings or the cuts or what have you, you're gonna have to forgive me. If this morning I woke up to a text from Ryan Poles saying, "Hey, buddy, I'm going on a sabbatical. You're taking over for the summer. Make the Chicago Bears a Super Bowl contender." Here's what I would do. First, I'd look at these two sheets that you see in front of you. On the left is my list of free agents that I've built with grades for every single player. And on the right is my team position group rankings sheet, which I use to make algorithms for how I value teams and bet on football games, but mostly just to visualize what each of these teams has going on. For the Bears, you can see first glance, look for red. Red and orange tells me we have a problem here we have to fix. Also gray. Gray means we literally don't have a solution on the roster right now. Our roster is incomplete. The Bears are in a nice spot. There's not a lot of red. Now, there's literally no green. Green means this is a strength. This is something you can rely on every week. The Bears don't really have that right now. But they're not hurting at any particular position yet. Now, with Keenan Allen as a unrestricted free agent, they kind of need a slot receiver. I think that Ben Johnson will operate, having DJ Moore work out of the slot a lot, like he did with Amon-Ra St. Brown, because it's just the easiest way to spam targets to a guy. But if the Bears are looking for a slot receiver, let's check out who's available in free agency. We're going to come down here and select receivers. Here are the receivers we got on the market. T. Higgins is not really on the market. Marquise Brown, I think he's really good. I think he's a great value, but that's not what we're looking for. We don't need a Jamison Williams. We need an Amon-Ra St. Brown. Somebody reliable who can work out of the slot. And the best option on the market is going to be Chris Godwin. But this little symbol here, bad value. Chris Godwin's 30. He's coming off of a pretty gruesome leg injury, and he's already had to move inside to the slot because he's losing a step and he's not a big guy and he doesn't really have what it takes to win as a Z receiver anymore. Stefon Diggs, kind of similar. He's on the downswing, and although I think he would make a really good slot, he's going to be expensive and he's going to want a prominent role. And I'm just not sure that that's what the Bears are going to be looking for with DJ Moore, a bona fide stud, and then Roma Dunze, who I think is overrated, but they just paid a lot of money for. Keenan Allen's honestly not the worst option, but I think the moral of this story is that's something you're going to have to address during the draft. And there's a lot of really good players who fit that bill in the draft. I think of a guy like Jalen Royals out of Utah State. I think that's a perfect fit. But there's a lot of slot receivers, even really late. Like if you want Jimmy Horn in the fifth or sixth round, he's a jitterbug quick dude who can really move. And I think that that would be a great option in a late round pick for the Bears. But we're just going to stick with free agency first. Other than slot wide receiver, the Bears don't need a ton of work. One thing I would like to see them address, however, is finish their interior offensive line. I think Jonah Jackson's a solid hire. I think that Tevin Johnson is actually a better player, but That's fine. We need to focus on what already exists and like what we can fix going forward. I would, or sorry, not Tevin Johnson, Tevin Jenkins. I would rather have Tevin Jenkins than Jonah Jackson. But Joe Thuney is top three guard in football, and you got him for nothing. So good job, Ryan Poles. I wouldn't have even known that's an option. Excellent job. As for the center position, look, everybody's talking about Drew Dahlman going to the Bears. It seems to be a match that's already been made. It's one of those things where like the tampering window seems to be opening earlier and earlier, right? Because even before the combine, people were talking about Dahlman, clean your hands, he's a Bear. I don't think he's a great fit. Now, I know he's young and he's a solid player, which is very valuable on the offensive line, but he's really making the most of his headway as a run blocker. And I would prefer a center that is a pass blocker. Centers in the run game, I don't think it's as important that they drive a guy off the ball as I think it's important that they just get in the way, right? So I'll take an Austin Corbett or a Robert Hainsey who are primarily pass blockers, lighter framed guys who move really well. I'll take them as my center instead for a lot cheaper. And I think that the guy I'm honing in on, I'd really like Robert Hainsey. I think he can be a low end starter for dirt cheap. And then I think that you draft interior linemen as heir apparent to your center. Alternatively, if you think you can get Ryan Kelly on a good deal, it totally depends on the money because Ryan Kelly is a player in decline. He is older in his mid 30s. You're only going to get him for a couple years. But if you want to take a Robert Kelly and then draft somebody in the later rounds to be your center of the future, I think that's a great idea too, as long as you can make the money work. And I think you certainly could. I think Dahlman is going to get a lot of money. I think he's the number one center on the market. Lots of teams are going to be after him. I would rather let somebody else pour money into a run blocking center who personally I believe his because really with offensive linemen, the only stats you get are PFF. And I believe that his PFF stats are inflated by being in some really friendly offensive line systems like Arthur Smith and who's the guy came from the Rams, worked for PFF, Atlanta. Let's just say Atlanta. I want to say like Brian Johnson, but that's not it. Uh, the Falcons ran a Sean McVay wide coast offense last year, and Dahlman continued to be good in it because similar to Arthur Smith, it's a run heavy, motion based system. It makes it easier on the interior offensive line. Now is where you can get into luxury, right? So let's eliminate all the filters and just look at who the best players out there are. Well, Trey Smith's not available. Zach Blunt is available, but he's going to command top money, and you just paid two linebackers a ton of money. Now, I said it the day they signed him. Trey Edmonds is not a good linebacker. He's a great athlete, but honestly, I think he'd be better off moving to the edge. He's never played edge, but Micah Parsons wasn't an edge before he got converted either. So I don't think that Trey Smith or Zach Blunt are realistic. T. Higgins, not available. He also got tagged. Charvarius Ward is interesting because I think Mooney Ward is an awesome physical corner, and he's a lot like the Bears starting corner, Jalen Johnson. But there's just enough there with Tyreek Stevenson that I don't quite want to replace him yet. You know what I'm saying? As for Marquise Brown, he's a deep threat, and you've got a quarterback who simply cannot throw the deep ball. Invest in the things that your team does well, not the things that your team can't do. You could have prime Randy Moss. Caleb Williams is going to have a hard time throwing the ball deep to him. Just forget about it and major in what you're good at. Stanley, hell yeah. Hell yeah, I'll take an elite left tackle. But he's going to cost a lot of money. And I don't know that you need him because you do have a top 10 pick. You have a top 40 pick with your second rounder. I think that there's lots of work that can be done here in the first and second rounds for the Bears. Brandon Scherf, unnecessary. Hassan Reddick, I don't know. I like Austin Booker, the second year rusher out of, I believe it's Kansas. He's a similarly bendy speed rusher. Hassan Reddick, a little bit of a malcontent, is going to want the bag, probably only wants to play for a contender. after he just forced his way off of his hometown team, who happened to also win the Super Bowl. He's got to be itching for a ring. He's going to go ring chasing. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in Kansas City on a cheaper deal. Amari Cooper, don't need him. Milton Williams is interesting. Everything I've heard is that the Patriots are basically just going to throw untold amounts of money at him and it's over. But Milton Williams would be a really good fit for the Bears next to Montez Sweat. That gives you at least one half of the off or defensive line that is really good, and then another half that's a little bit more unproven. The Bears have two defensive tackles that they drafted just a couple years ago out of Florida and South Carolina. And I think that there's potential there with both of them. I didn't love the picks. I don't love the players, but there's something. Same with Austin Booker. There's something. And I'd rather save my cap space for hitting on big weapons that are more established and cheaper. That sounds like you're asking for a lot. Like, I want somebody who's more consistent and better and cheaper. Yeah, don't we all? Don't we all wish our girlfriend was in better shape and curvier and put on a better face? Whatever. But NFL free agency is such an inefficient market that I believe these things are out there. Like, for instance, Levi Onwuzurike out of Washington has been playing for the Lions. And the reason I say playing is because the guy can't stay on the field. He's got back problems. He's injury prone. But because of that, I think you could get him really cheap. And when he does play, he's really good. So I think that would be an excellent addition for a team like the Bears. And really, we're already in business just having the best head coach, the best play caller in the division. And I don't say that lightly. I love Matt LaFleur. I love Kevin O'Connell, but I think that this is the best guy. If you look at what the Lions were last year, the Bears are already similar. Elite offensive line in Detroit versus really good offensive line in Chicago, barring an addition, right? As long as they get an average center, this is almost as good as Detroit's offensive line. If you get a good center and you get a good left tackle, like God forbid the Bears draft Josh Simmons, all of a sudden this is a top five offensive line. As far as receivers, I think DJ Moore is better than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think that in a Ben Johnson system, his production will finally match that talent and ability. I also think that Rome Odunze is about as good as Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is amazing at what he does, which is take the top off of defense. But Jared Goff and Caleb Williams both really struggle throwing the deep ball. So it doesn't matter that much. And they struggle for opposite reasons, right? Like Caleb can throw the ball a mile, he just doesn't know where to put it. And Jared Goff knows exactly where he wants that ball to land. He just can't make it go far enough. But the result is the same. The deep ball is not really what this offense needs. And if you need a speedster who can make things happen after the catch, you got DJ Moore. So I think the wide receivers are at least a wash. Offensive line is a little bit worse. Running game, that's where you need help. I don't think you can add another free agent running back after you just added DeAndre Swift. And you do have Roshan Johnson, who I think is every bit your David Montgomery dupe. If you don't think that DeAndre Swift can be your Jahmyr Gibbs, there's plenty in the draft. Whether you go Trevor Etienne, the value option in the fourth, whether you go Travion Henderson in the second or third, probably third, or hell, even if you splurge and get Ashton Genty, which every day it looks more and more like the Bears are going to draft Ashton Genty at 10. Not sure I would, but it looks like that's what's gonna happen. Suddenly, that Bears offense looks almost identical to the Lions offense, with the added bonus that I think Caleb Williams is a little better than Jared Goff. And now you're just making luxury moves, right? Like, who can you get on a deal? Can you get Levi on Week? Yeah, yeah. Levi O. Can you get Big Levi? Can you get him to join you? Can you go take a run at Khalil Mack and see if he'll come be your DE2 and then have Austin Booker as a rotational edge? You kick either Sweat or Mack into defensive tackle at three technique on pass downs. That would be sick. Do you want to take a stab at Chase Young and see if he can play some inside outside versatility along your defensive line? Honestly, I don't think you need to do much. I think that the weakest link on this offense now, assuming you go get Robert Hainsey, a plug and play bottom level starter at your center. Now your weakest link on offense is probably Caleb Williams. and you're not moving on from him and you're not fixing him. So, yeah, the Bears would be a lot better if they had drafted Drake May last year, or maybe even Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy. But as it currently stands, this is what you got, and I can't fix it that much because otherwise every single team would turn into trade first round picks for Ben Johnson or Andy Reid and trade all your first round picks for Drake May. That's how you fix your team. Can't do that. So I have to operate within a little bit of the realm of reality. Let's just quickly see players that I think are particularly good deals and see if there's any that jump out to me. Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking a chance on Andre Cisco, seeing if he could be your Kevin Byard permanent replacement. Marcus Mariota would be an incredible backup for Caleb Williams, and honestly, probably an upgrade if he were to have to play in spot duty. And, it's a guy who's been a high draft pick. He's been through every possible offense. I think that getting Mariota would be ideal for the Bears as a backup quarterback, and it's certainly something I would do. Um, Other than that, I think the Bears are kind of set, and I think they're like an 11 win team this year. So that's going to cap off how I would fix the Bears. In short, I don't think there's a lot of fixing left to do. I think the Pulse has done a pretty good job building this offense roster out, and you just need a couple draft picks. I wouldn't take Ashton Genty. I wouldn't take him at 10. I would wait a little bit. I'd get Trevor Etienne in the fourth, and I would let him, Roshan Johnson, and DeAndre Swift see what they can do. But if you're going to look into free agency instead for a running back, because that seems to be something that the Bears really want, is a new running back to start. I don't know. You're looking at the ghost of Nick Chubb, RIP for what was. I like Javonte Williams enough. I think he's a decent value, but again, not a star. They're certainly not going to go after Khalil Herbert again. There's just not a lot of running back depth out there. The Bears are a good team, and they don't need a lot of work to get much better. Now, they don't have any A's, but you know how you get A's? Instead of reaching on Ashton Genty at 10, you turn your offensive tackles from a B into an A by drafting Josh Simmons, right? Or by being really sneaky and getting Ariante Ursary in the second round, who I think will also be a stud left tackle. Suddenly, that offensive line is top five for sure. Uh, but the Bears have done a really good job of building out a foundation that they can build upon. Like every year after this year, they're not going to be trying to fill little holes. They're going to be saying, who's the best player out there? Oh, Jalen Carter fell to us. Well, we don't need to reach on a tackle. We could take Jalen Carter, and suddenly we have an A or an A plus defensive interior. So the Bears have set the foundation so that in years to come, they can build themselves into a juggernaut. And with that head coach, I'm optimistic. And the Bears have the ability to be opportunistic. So that's the Bears. Moving on to the Packers. Next up is probably going to be my favorite team to fix in this division because I think the Minnesota Vikings are awesome. And I did last year too. That's why I made a ton of money betting on them almost every week and betting their season win total over because I knew that even Sam Darnold is going to look really good in this offense. They have a great offensive head coach and they have superstar wide receivers who are all under contract again for 2025. So things are looking up. That being said, Minnesota has a lot of work to do because they're sick at a couple things, particularly offensive tackle and wide receiver. But almost everything else could use a little work. If you see the chart on the right, they kind of need a running back. In fact, that B accounts for them keeping Aaron Jones. If they can't, I mean, that goes way down. We're talking about incomplete. So they need a running back. They could use a better slot receiver, I guess, but that's kind of an embarrassment of riches at this point. Their tight end Hawkinson's good, and he's actually going to be healthy this year. Their offensive line, Blake Brendel and Dalton Reisner are a solid combo. Reisner's a UFA. If you can't keep Reisner, you have a bit of a problem. So the Vikings should be looking at a cheap, cost-effective interior offensive line helper. This isn't a case where you just go throw money at Brandon Scherf. You need the money. You've got to pay Justin Jefferson. You're going to have to try to pay Jordan Addison. You got stars, and stars breed cap problems. So you need a running back, at least one guard. Let's call it a running back and a guard on offense, and they need to be cost effective. On defense, you have real holes. I don't know who's going to be playing the defensive interior for you next year because Harrison Phillips is just another year older. Jerry Tillery stinks and is a free agent. And then Jonathan Grenard's an awesome defensive end. Andrew Van Ginkel is useful. I love Dallas Turner. So your ends are actually totally fine. But Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery are free agents. Harrison Phillips is more of a nose tackle. He's not really an every down type of guy. You need at least one defensive tackle. And again, needs to be cost effective because you need a new left cornerback, right cornerback, and free safety. Yikes. Cameron Bynum is going to get overpaid. He was a chess piece for the Vikings last year. The whole point of having Brian Flores is that everybody's a chess piece. So I'm not worried about keeping him. Let Cameron Bynum walk. You need to cut corners on cost where you can. Frankly, if Harrison Smith wasn't such a legend, I'd be trying to figure out a way to unload his cap hit as well. I cut corners on safeties. I don't think they matter as much, especially when you've got Josh Metellus, a solid safety, as your nickelback, and you've got a guy like Brian Flores who turns safeties into linebacker, defensive tackle, blitz hybrid, wacko joker things. Um, Real shame they couldn't make Lewis Cine work out. I wonder what was going on inside his head. So we're looking for defensive interior, cornerback, offensive guard, and running back. Let's just filter out the free agent list on the left. Next, we're going up north to visit the hated Green Bay Packers, who my grandpa played for. So I guess I don't hate him that much. Uh, the Packers are a team that are kind of sitting in that position where the Bears recently got to. The Packers always maintain a baseline of decent at everything, but now they really need to start adding weaponry, and not weaponry as in wide receivers and running backs, but more so in like they need top flight players. So let's come over to the free agent list and just look at A minus and above guys, like real studs, because I know the Packers don't like to make splashes in free agency, but we're not talking about what I think teams will do. We're talking about what I would do if tomorrow Brian Gutekunst wakes up and he's like, dude, I hate this stuff. You come take my job. I'm going to go live in Bora Bora. Well, the Packers' offensive line is just good enough, but it's not good. Like, I don't think Rasheed Walker at left tackle is an answer. I think Zach Tom might be, but I also think he'd be better served moving inside. I would not mind at all taking a shot at a Brandon Scherf. And obviously, I'm going to say this for every team with offensive line problems. Go get Ronnie Stanley. He's not as much in the run game as you might like, but he's a monster in pass protection, and he is a smart, savvy veteran who is healthy. Go get him. Yeah, it's going to cost money. No, he's not going to give you a ton of years, but he's the kind of player that'll age well because he has a finesse style of pass blocking, right? Like he's just a good mover, and he will continue to be a good mover into his late 30s. Go lock Ronnie Stanley up, pair him on the left with Elgton Jenkins, and suddenly pretty good left side. God forbid you return Josh Myers and you find a way to kick Zach Tom into guard. You're cooking with gas. That is a good offensive line. Uh, as far as wide receivers, the Packers are in a weird spot where they have a decent version of every prototype of wide receiver. They just don't have a guy, right? Like Romeo Dubs, whatever. He's like your consummate possession receiver, like an X who's not flashy, but he fills the X position, like a C plus B minus X receiver. That's fine. And Christian Watson is a little bit of an upgrade from Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but it's a similar thing where he's big, he's tall, he runs really fast, and he doesn't really catch everything. But he's useful, very useful. And, Jaden Reed, great route runner, fast, not very big. There are limitations on what you can do with him. And then finally, Dontavian Wicks, who's like a little bit of each one of those, but can't seem to put it all together and become a star. If the opportunity had presented itself, a T. Higgins, a Trey Smith, a Zach Bond, these are guys who would be really helpful. The only one left is Marquise Brown, but really, I don't see why you would pay a Marquise Brown to do most of what Christian Watson does and a little bit else of what Jaden Reed does. It just doesn't feel like a good use of money. I'd rather wait and see if I can find something in the draft because wide receiver is not a weakness. It's just not a strength. Other than that, I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball because, I like Tucker Kraft a lot. In fact, a B minus is too low for that room with Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. It's a B at the least. It's probably a B plus. Running backs, Josh Jacobs was super productive last year. I would rather have somebody a little bit more explosive because I think anybody can be productive in that offense. I would rather find somebody who's going to be a value add. But again, like I said with the Bears, I don't think that there are those kinds of running backs in this draft. So now I'm just looking for defense. In fact, let's filter really quick. So I filtered out, I only have defensive players listed. Who should the Packers go after? Well, they've been investing in their defensive line, and they have players that should theoretically be good, but they're just not. Like Devonte Wyatt looked good coming out of Georgia, and he just hasn't been that guy in the NFL. And Kenny Clark was once a premier nose tackle, but he's kind of fallen off, and he's in his 30s now. Maybe he's just not that guy anymore. Rashawn Gary's a stud when he plays, but he's hurt all the time and he's kind of out of position. You'd like to be able to kick him inside. And they drafted Lucas Van Ness, and it turns out the guy who's like good at one thing in college, not good at that many things in the NFL either. So, despite lots of investment, the Packers could really use some defensive line help, but they also are going to need secondary help because Jair Alexander is likely going to get released. And Jair Alexander is a stud cornerback. I really like Eric Stokes. They're probably not bringing him back. Keyshawn Nixon and Javon Bullard, or sorry, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, and Xavier McKinney are the least of their problems in the secondary, but that's not sick either. So really, I'm looking for any plus starter on defense that I can add. Really, anything above a B, I'm gonna be looking at. Huafunga, I think that's kind of redundant to Xavier McKinney, who had a great season. So no. I wouldn't mind Andre Cisco. He's a favorite of mine, but again, I don't think it's necessary. Calais Campbell is not what they're looking at, and neither really is DeMarcus Lawrence because everything DeMarcus Lawrence does, Rashawn Gary does probably better. You don't want to take a chance on Chase Young because if you want a young toolsy guy, you already have Van Ness, who you paid a first round pick for. So that's kind of occupied. Khalil Mack would be a good signing, I believe, just because he's going to walk in and be a really good edge opposite Kingsley Enagbare or opposite Rashawn Gary instead of Kingsley Enagbare, who I don't really love, even though he's very long. Josh Sweat is another one. Really, like Josh Sweat is just a stud. He's a really good defensive end. You're gonna have to pay a ton of money for the Super Bowl champion, but then your defensive line is shored up and you don't have to worry anymore. Um, Isaiah McDuffie and Quay Walker, I don't love, but I do like Edgerrin Cooper. And see, this is the problem with the Packers. No holes, right? So you got to just pick value. Levi Onwuzurike doesn't actually really fit what Green Bay does on defense just because he's a three technique and they like to do more multiple fronts. They're not really as four down as a three technique would like to flourish. The rest of these guys are mostly just, placeholders. Personally, I think it's crazy that they're going to try to get rid of Jair Alexander. So I guess you have to go after cornerbacks, in which case, yeah, go after Mooney. right? Go after Charvarius Ward because he is sick. To add the cornerbacks in, go after Charvarius Ward. He's worth the money. You're losing a great man corner. Replace him with a just as good, if not better, man corner. Uh, if you miss out on Charvarius Ward, Stephon Gilmore, he's just doing a tour of like the entire NFL, taking 1 year deals, playing way above what he got signed for, and testing the market again. And yeah, I would definitely sign Stephon Gilmore. And if I could find the cash, I'd go after both and just totally revamp my cornerback room. I think if you did that, Packers would be in a good spot. But I think the real thing holding the Packers back, it's none of those. The real reason the Packers aren't going to win too much is because they don't have a quarterback. And I know they just paid Jordan Love a ton of money, but they were wrong to. I don't think Jordan Love would be the best quarterback in this free agency class. I would rather have Marcus Mariota. I'd slightly rather have Sam Darnold, although probably not for the money. I'd rather give Jarrett Stidham a chance, and fuck, I would still take Aaron Rodgers over Jordan Love. And I mean it. Like Jordan Love is not good. He's not a running threat. He's athletic, but he's not a runner, right? And then his accuracy is just putrid. I said it in his, practical rookie year 2 years ago, and he had those 6 games where he put up big stats, and people were saying, you were wrong. He just needed to figure it out. And then he followed it up with a sophomore season from hell. He's a bad quarterback. He's very turnover prone. He's inaccurate. He makes terrible decisions. And it leaves Matt LaFleur having to basically run his offense like paint by numbers. If Matt LaFleur's not telling him, here's where your open man's going to be, he's your first read, take this many steps, roll this direction, and throw it exactly to this spot where this receiver will be standing open. If it's any more difficult than that, Jordan Love creates a problem for the Packers. So I would be throwing money at a Marcus Mariota, a Jarrett Stidham, an Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, I know Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back, but you got to find a cost effective replacement. And you have to have a quarterback competition in camp. And when Jordan Love falters in the regular season, which he will, you have to be ready to put in the new backup. I don't think that Jarrett Stidham's winning you a Super Bowl, but I think he's going to be consistently better than Jordan Love. And I think that Marcus Mariota would actually be way better. And I think that Marcus Mariota would be really good in this offense. We've seen Mariota start in places with a lot less to work with and be just as good, if not better, than what we've seen from Jordan Love as far as production goes. So my answer for the Packers is you're up a creek because you just paid a ton of money to a bad quarterback and you don't have any studs. In the draft, you should be targeting the best players available. Just find a star and start building strengths from your base, right? But if you really do walk away from Jair Alexander, you have to throw money at Charvarius Ward or Stephon Gilmore or fuck at least Jordan Lewis, who's a slot corner, but at least he shores up your slot because you can't lose both of your starting corners in Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander in 1 year. Or else in the first round, you're looking at, Amos or Ben Morrison or even Siobhan Ravel because you have to fill that need. It's too important a position to just let flounder. All right, on to the Vikings. Lions fans, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it ever happened. I don't think the Lions are going to go back to being terrible, but now that they've lost Ben Johnson, I think that they're going to take a real step back. Let's just look at the roster. The offensive line is still elite as all hell. Do not have to touch it. Do not fuck with it. You're going to lose Kevin Zeitler. I trust Christian Mahogany to walk in and be very good day one. Sam Laporta, very good tight end. Jameson Williams is a wonderful X. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a wonderful slot. You really don't have anything to go with them as your Z receiver, but you already have two good receivers. Your running back duo is good. Giving David Montgomery fewer touches will make it great, right? Because Jahmyr Gibbs is awesome, and you shouldn't take the ball out of his hands. The defense is a problem, but it's getting healthy again, so it won't be as much of a problem. The real issue is just you have Jared Goff as your quarterback. Your offense is not going to do a lot. And you just paid Jared Goff a ton of money, which was ill-advised, but it didn't matter because you had Ben Johnson. Well, now you don't. And you don't even have Tanner Eggstrand, his protege. So I'm not loving it. On defense, the best edge in football comes back. Aiden Hutchinson, a fucking monster. I mean, I'm praying that he looks the same. I'm praying he didn't lose anything due to injury because he was amazing last year until he got hurt. Your interior is going to be Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader. Onwuzurike is probably leaving. I like that combo. I don't love it. It's solid. You can kick Josh Pascal in there too if you want. And then your other edge is going to be Zadarius Smith. Eh, I would like something better on that other end. Your linebackers are the definition of solid with Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, and Malcolm Rodriguez. Like the definition of solid. Anzalone, not particularly good at anything, but he's smart as hell, so he's always in the right position. Jack Campbell, great athlete, still figuring out how to play football. And Malcolm Rodriguez, not a great athlete, but goddamn is he smart. Goddamn can he come up and hit. What a fullback. what a what a Sam linebacker. Secondary is phew. The Lions don't have a cornerback that I think should start. Like Terry and Arnold, I think would be a good safety. I don't think he's a corner at all. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are both sick, but then Brian Branch is a problem because, like, do you play him at strong safety? Because he's very good at it, but like, it's not that helpful. Or do you play him at nickel where he's an elite nickel and it's much more helpful, but now you have a hole in the secondary again. And you can't really play Brian Branch outside because he's just small and not that athletic. So you run into the problem of God forbid the other team comes out heavy and you have Brian Branch on the field. You can't just shift him over to cornerback. You have to kick him all the way back to safety. It creates communication problems. It creates substitution problems. Now you're mismatched on defense. Just a lot of quandaries. And it's a talented roster, man. You got good edges and you got a great line. So what should you be focusing on? Focus on another wide receiver because you have to surround Goff with the gold standard, or else he's going to give you the poop standard. I would take a look at a defensive lineman if there was good value, like there is on Levi. If you can keep Big O, if you can keep Levi, I would definitely do it, and I'd give him lots of snaps. But the secondary needs addressing. And I don't know exactly what kind of defense the Lions are going to run now that Aaron Glenn is gone, but I'm assuming it'll probably still be fairly man heavy because that's how they made their money under Aaron Glenn. Let's select cornerbacks. Who's available? Again, you can't spend big money. You've been spending big money. You got to go bargain bin. You got to take a run at a Stephon Gilmore. And maybe he's a good mentor for Terry and Arnold, big physical corners. It's just Stephon Gilmore was actually athletic, whereas Terry and Arnold's not. Maybe you get a Jordan Lewis and suddenly you don't have to worry about the slot because Brian Branch is going to play safety full time. Jordan Lewis plays the slot, and now you just have to worry about your outside corners being a weakness. Not sure you want that, but in a division where Caleb Williams struggles to throw deep down the field on the outside, and the Vikings, you're not going to be able to cover them with one guy anyway. Maybe it's not the worst thing. Eric Stokes is going to be my guy every fucking time. I think he's a stilly value, especially if you run man coverage, and I think the Lions do. So Eric Stokes is going to be one of my cheat codes. Every team that needs a corner, I'm going to say go try to get Eric Stokes because he's not going to cost anything, and I think he can still be a really good outside corner. Uh, Darius Slay is not really what they do, although maybe he would enjoy a return home to Detroit. Who knows? That's probably the move. He gets to return home to Detroit where he came from, come full circle, chase a last ring on the way out because the Lions are going to have a ton of hype. That's what he's going to do. Byron Murphy's a slot corner and a good one, but he shouldn't play outside, and I think he's going to want to. Paulson Adebo is a solid second corner. Lots of good slot corners available. So maybe that's the move. Maybe the move is Go after one of these slot corners, an Asante Samuel, a Byron Murphy, whoever you can get for cheap. Jordan Lewis, if he's at a big discount, which he could be because he's a slot corner, so he's not a starter per old-fashioned parlance. And then on the outside, add at least one guy. Go get an Eric Stokes, go get a Darius Slay, something cost effective with upside, and possibly that Terry Arnold could monitor to try to model his game after. But no matter what you do, the elephant in the room is just going to be Jared Goff at quarterback with any offensive coordinator that's not the best in the world, right? Like with the Rams, when Sean McVay first burst onto the scene and nobody really understood who he was doing, Goff put up good stats. But the second that McVay reverted from being the best to damn good, Goff was not enough. Jared Goff looked terrible in Detroit, and then they got Ben Johnson instead of Anthony Lynn calling the plays. And he didn't look better, but the stats sure did. Now that Ben Johnson's gone, how's Jared Goff going to fare? Maybe he's old enough now in his 30s that he's at the stage where he can call the plays, he can take over some of the responsibilities of an offensive coordinator and it won't hurt. Maybe Dan Campbell is going to be calling plays, and maybe Dan Campbell learned a lot of things from Ben Johnson, or maybe Dan Campbell is secretly a great OC. It's a lot of gambling. And it's a Lions team that I thought was overrated last year as it was. So, in conclusion, the NFC North is a really loaded division, and all four of these teams are fun to think about. But all four of them are kind of tied to their quarterbacks, and there's really not a lot of room to wiggle. All four of them have good players already, so there's not a ton that needs to be done. But I think that with a few swift moves, every one of these teams can be a Super Bowl contender with the possible exception of the Lions. Like, I think if the Packers bring in a Marcus Mariota to replace Jordan Love, you're getting an okay quarterback to replace a bad quarterback with a great offensive mind and a solid roster. You add a couple pieces here and there. You bring in a Ronnie Stanley. You bring in, uh, you know, a running back in the draft who's a little bit more explosive, especially in the pass game, like a Trevor Etienne, Travion Henderson type or a Basil Tootin out of Virginia Tech, a freak athlete type, suddenly that Packers team is really dangerous. If I'm the Vikings and I bring in Eric Stokes and I bring in Talanoa Huafunga and I get out of JJ McCarthy what I think I will, wham bam, you're working here. As for the Bears, they're already on track to be something special. Their only limiting factor, like the Packers, like the Lions, I don't like their quarterback, right? I mean, Caleb Williams was not good in 2023 at USC. He had a few really great games in 2022 at USC that won him the Heisman because they just happened to be at the end of the year when everybody was watching. But for the most part, I have not seen a lot of good film from Caleb Williams in the NFL or at USC. And I'm starting to worry that I was too high on him saying he could be a solid NFL starter. We'll see. If anybody can turn a bad quarterback into a super good quarterback production wise, it's Ben Johnson, which is exactly why I think that the Lions are going to struggle too. If all these teams play their cards the way I prescribe them to in free agency, I think we're looking at the Vikings winning the division, the Bears being a close second, the Packers being extremely close in third, and the Lions bringing up the rear. But I think all four of these teams are winning record teams. And yeah, if you told me the Lions won 11 games and they were super good on offense again, I would say that makes a lot of sense because Dan Campbell could be the answer as a play caller. Or this new offensive coordinator they picked up could be a good offensive coordinator. But I can't tell, and it's really hard to say the team losing the best play caller and going down to an unknown is going to miss no steps and be totally fine. So that's how I would fix all the teams in the NFC North. I think that if they took my advice and they followed free agency per my prescriptions, they'd all be contenders for the Super Bowl. And I think that if they really, really mess up and they don't really get any better this offseason, they're still all 500 or better teams. So, with that being said, I've got NFL draft film to grind, and I've got like one more of these videos to churn out every day for like the next 4 days so that when Tuesday or Monday or whenever the hell rolls around and tampering opens up, these videos are up. In the meantime, I'm going to be grinding film. Asta.